On today's episode of the Cryptoverse, I have a chat with Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast. Dash Detailed is a weekly YouTube show about the privacy-focused digital currency known as Dash. It is hosted by the lovely Amanda B. Johnson and keeps you right up to date about all the exciting developments in the Dash ecosystem. Click the link in the video description and subscribe today. Hi there guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Cryptoverse, your regular dose of news and commentary on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies and blockchains. I am your host, Chris Coney. Today is Friday the 17th of February 2017. And today I have an interview that I recorded with Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast, so I hope you enjoy it.
There's a best. Let me show you a better way. Hi folks, this is Jack Spirko. And with that wrapped up, let's get our special guest on the line and talk all about cryptocurrencies in the blockchain. I'm kind of jazzed about it. Again, he is the founder of Cryptoverse. He's also known as the marketing monk, better known as Chris Coney. Hey, Chris, man, welcome to the Survival Podcast.
I am absolutely delighted to be here, Jack. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for joining us all the way from the UK, man. You've not been on the show before. I kind of gave the audience a little bit of your bio in the intro segment, but can you tell us who the heck is Chris, man? Let's take it back to like you're in I don't know what to call it. Imagine high school, like last year of traditional school. You're trying to figure out what to do with your life. How do you end up founding a thing like Cryptoversity from that point? What led you into this world?
It's a good question. I think we call it secondary school. You have high school, you have it for a year longer than we do.
Okay.
That's by the by. And we have college and university are two different things. So the secondary school thing, which was I would be, 16, 17.
Sure.
You leave school at 16, right? I hadn't figured it out by then, to be perfectly honest with you. Where I was at in my mind at that time was I narrowed it down to I thought I was going to go into business management of some kind. I don't know how I came to that conclusion, to be honest, given that I was a bit of a loner at school. I was I quite preferred to observe the world, trying to figure it out, so I didn't have a big social circle. I was literally like very aloof, if that's the right word. And I would much prefer to try and figure out what's going on here, right? Just studying people's behavior and the infrastructure, the organization I was part of, the school system, how does that work? Why are we here? All that sort of stuff was always running through my mind. And as a child, of course, I didn't even have the worldly knowledge to even process those kinds of questions. So it was a very confusing time for me back in school. But we do have this thing, what do you have, a career counselor, I think they call it in England, where you sit down with some government employee and they basically limit your future to a set of options, right? Which is horrific to me now, having got older and much more worldly wise. I think this is absolutely horrific that you say, so what do you want to go with your career? And the first assumption, which of course kids have no wisdom to see beyond this, but they are squarely driving you into the employment machine, right? A job, a 9 to 5, and we're programmed with that's just what you do, right? That's if you're not taught an alternative, that becomes the only way to make a living. And to me, that's one of the most horrific things about that experience was you just go, I'll just accept that. And you have to give them an answer because otherwise you get judged and ridiculed for not knowing what the hell you want to do. which at 16, to me, it's ridiculous anyway. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? I was actually just looking on your site at a previous episode. You can follow your passion, you have to find it. I believe that's what the school system should be helping people to do. Figure out their own strengths, weaknesses, the gifts, talents, and abilities. And then once you've got that bit, then maybe you can build a career on top, right?
Absolutely.
Well, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I didn't figure out. It was a constant process, and I did a computer science degree. That was obviously after I left school and so on. I did a computer science degree just purely because that's what I was into. I was always into building computers and and I think I'm built with kind of a logical mind. So I kind of like the idea that computers are quite precise, programming is quite precise. I like that kind of stuff, that if you do this, it will always produce the same result type of thing. I guess that was something I struggled with as a kid, was certainty, or I struggled with uncertainty, which is probably what drew me to computers, is because they're very, very precise, predictable, and all the rest of it. So I did a computer science degree purely because that's what I was into, and I figured, well, rather than try and figure out a career, in a short space of time, let me do a degree that I'm interested in, make sure I actually get a good grade, versus trying to second guess my career and do something I might end up liking and, flopping it or whatever. So coming out of university, no one would actually employ me. I spent about 6 months driving all over the country, going into interviews and to this job, that job, graduate opportunity, this, that, and the other. No one would give me a job. Nobody. They all turned me down, didn't call me back, etc. I started to panic about this a little bit because the more time went by after I'd left university and graduated, the more I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to become a statistic. So only a certain portion of graduates are still unemployed after a certain amount of time. I think I must have read that somewhere, only 20% of graduates are still unemployed after 3 months or something. Now, bear in mind, that sounds ridiculous by today's standards, but this was back in 2003, 2004. So it was quite normal for a graduate to get a job very, very quickly afterwards. It's not like the struggle that the kids have today. But anyway, it was still a concern. I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be a loser, I guess, was what I was telling myself. So ultimately I thought, my dad's always been self-employed. I always figured one day I would set up my own business. So it's going to have to be that way then. I may as well do it now because no one else is going to give me a job, and I'm not spending another 6 months on the road and having doors slammed in my face. So that was that. I set up a web design agency to begin with. I actually bought into a franchise, which was horrifically expensive. I actually, 22 years old, I went to the bank, and when was this, 2005, when they were lending money to anybody and everybody. So I just went to the bank and said, hey, my dad banks with you guys. Can you lend me £35,000, please? Which is what, $50,000 or $60,000, right?
Sure, yeah.
22 years old, never had a job, no life experience, no business experience, 2-page business plan. They said, sure. There you go, right? I was going to buy this.
Off you go.
Yep, say again, mate.
Off you go, right?
Off you go. Yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm going to buy this franchise. That's probably, they weren't that stupid. They at least knew I was going to invest in a franchise which had a greater chance of success than me just starting from nothing. Anyway, I've learned a lot about franchises, mainly that they're not particularly interested in your success. They're far more interested in the $50,000 to $60,000 franchise fee that you pay them on day one. So that hurt. That was kind of a baptism of fire, apprenticeship type of thing. Sink or swim, so I had to learn about business ASAP, otherwise I was going to be in the hole, right? So that taught me a lot. And I actually learned a lot more about computers and web design on the go, on top of my computer science degree. Didn't really enjoy that stuff, to be honest, just because it was so hard. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I hated uncertainty, so all of that in a big soup was pretty excruciating for me. I ended up starting 2 other agencies after that based on my experience and what I learned. And then finally, in 2014, I think it was, I sold the company to my co-director. And then, because I got to a point of dissatisfaction where I was like, I still don't quite know what I want to do and what my purpose is in life and so on. But what I do know now is this is not it. And I think if you get to that point and you have a certainty that, well, it's not this, that's good enough to make a decision on, right? And
Sure.
I've been doing it, from 22 until, it was like 10 years maybe, 7 or 8 years probably, doing the same thing and just going through the motions. And I thought, I can't do this forever. Just wore me down. Anyway, how Cryptoverse came from all that was, I guess I had the background in the technology side of things, computer science, and that was something that was interest to me. And I'd always had a fascination with economics, which was something else I studied to try and help me in my business struggles. I always found business really, really hard because I just didn't know how to run a business. So I thought, well, I should probably study economics and figure out how money works. And I thought, okay, you have to be able to sell, so I might have to study some psychology. right? And that led me into all kinds of other areas. And then I had to figure out about how to market your business. So by default, I learned all about marketing and so on. So over time, what I didn't know was it was almost like I was being prepared for the day that I discovered like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I can't remember when that day was, though, mate, to be honest. Bitcoin was one of those things that I sort of heard about it, and we hear about a lot of these technologies, and you sort of, you brush them off to begin with as, oh yeah, sounds interesting. And then over time, you get re-exposed to them, and then again, and you sort of go, every time it comes back to you, or to me in this case, it was like, took a bit more notice of it, looked into it a little bit more, dropped it. Next time it came along, looked into it a bit more, and gradually my curiosity grew until I'd done enough haphazard research to go, oh my goodness, I think I need to take this more seriously. So down the rabbit hole I went, and how Cryptoverse got born out of that was, I read this book actually during my study of sales and marketing. It's called 80-20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall. And it's the Pareto principle, like 80% of the results comes from 20% of the effort and all that sort of stuff. And in that very book, he's talking about how to use leverage. Like, don't work hard, work smart. And one of the exercises in that book is to kind of do the self-inventory. He basically said email like 5 or 6 people that you know very well and trust and ask them these questions. Like, what am I good at? What stands out? What am I bad at? All this sort of stuff. So I did it. I sent the email out and I categorically got back the same thing, the same answers. And then based on the exercise in the book, I formed what Perry Marshall calls like your competency zone or something it's called. And what I discovered from that, through people reflecting it back to me, was that my unique gifts, talents, and abilities were the ability to communicate like knowledge and information in such a way that makes people feel like respected rather than patronized, which is often why people don't like school or learning stuff. It's because teachers tend to be intellectually arrogant and the student feels bad for not knowing. And the feedback I got was that I somehow have this gift to impart knowledge and teach people without making them feel stupid, right? And that was an eye-opener to me, because I was obviously doing that anyway, because these people noticed it about me. I thought, okay, if that really is my skill zone, cool. So this was right alongside me discovering Bitcoin and researching it. And I thought, well, light bulb moment one day. I thought, do you know what's really missing in this industry? There's all people on forums and Reddit and this and that, lots of new people wanting to get into this Bitcoin and cryptocurrency stuff, but there's so many questions and there seems to be almost little to no material on like training materials, courses. No one's doing this. So that was the light bulb moment. Okay, I've just discovered what my kind of core gift is, and I've just absorbed all this knowledge about Bitcoin and figured out how it works. Well, why don't I give the service to the community and put those two things together and establish some kind of, educational institution that teaches people from the ground up and how to apply this stuff. And Cryptoversity was actually just a bolt from the blue idea. It was like Cryptocurrency University. And I thought Cryptoversity was kind of a cute name, so I just ran with it. I didn't really overthink it. I just thought, right, I'm going to start doing it. Registered the domain name, threw up a little website, and just made it up as I went along. And that's been going like 2 years now.
Awesome. And I mean, there's a lot of great businesses that start that way. I'm big on when I teach people about business, like saying, like, once you know what you're doing, you got to come up with a plan, a revenue model, all that stuff. But when you're not sure what you want to do, just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, sometimes you fall in. And it's funny the way you describe that is, like, everything I was doing without my knowledge was leading me up to the point where I would do this. Mm-hmm. That's kind of exactly how I feel about what I do here with this podcast. The background, all of the stuff that, including a lot of stuff I really didn't want to do, has now been beneficial, right? So that's cool, man. Since we're here to talk about cryptocurrencies and the blockchain and all that stuff, let's start out with Bitcoin specifically. What's all the hype about? What's the big deal? Does Bitcoin deserve as much hype as it gets?
Does it deserve the hype? To that I would say, if you look at Bitcoin and its future over a long enough time horizon, I don't think you could overstate it or overhype it, right? It's that big. Given a long enough time horizon. I do think, though, that the mistake even I made when I first came across it was like how quickly that transformation is going to happen. right? As soon as we see the vision of what the world could be like, the mind can go into the future very, very quickly. Like in an instant, you can rewind your memory, fast forward it, come back to the present. But physical reality doesn't move as fast as that, and that's what kind of sometimes stresses us out when we find something as groundbreaking as the internet or as Bitcoin. We kind of want to just fast forward the movie to the good bit, right? Which, you know what I'm saying? So it's gonna take a lot longer than we would probably like, but eventually we don't even know it's like the unknown unknowns. It's going to change things we don't even conceive of yet. Even I can't conceive it. I don't think anyone can fully comprehend the impact. It's kind of like when the internet was first invented, and we would never, ever, ever have imagined what we have today, right? It just wasn't even a blink in our eye.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of put it like this, like kind of in the vein of what you're saying. Online video was inevitable, but YouTube was not inevitable. Right. The form in which it would take and be its most popular or most successful was wide open. And like even now, YouTube, if you said, what's the number one video site online, you'd say YouTube. Does that mean that YouTube absolutely will be the number one online video site 10 years from now? No.
Right. No,
it might be, but that doesn't mean it's going to be. And I think that's a lot of like stuff with Bitcoin is we don't even really know yet.
Right. And even more than that, Jack, right? The way the internet was built, it's really not built to handle streaming video like we do today. It's really not built for that.
No.
So some really smart people had to figure out like additional layers on top of the internet protocols, and because to do what YouTube did, that's a hard problem to solve. It's a miracle, mate, what they did in terms of the technology to make that possible. And now you just pick up your phone, you load up the YouTube app, and you get 4K streaming video straight to your little 4-inch screen like it's nothing, right?
And you got people like me running around with an iPhone shooting, hot HD video and uploading it from that phone and having it visible to people 3 minutes after I upload. It's insane.
I mean, for me, I've been a techno guy for most of my life. But even it's kind of you step back in humility and go, wow, right? Even though, even the most technically knowledgeable people, I think, could benefit from that. Just stepping back, and even though we understand how this stuff works, you have to appreciate the spectacle. Like, wow.
Yeah. And you think about this too, like one of the reasons Google bought YouTube way, way back in the day when they did, they had so much flipping cash on hand, they were afraid they were going to be forced to basically be turned into a mutual fund because instead of a company, they had too much capital in pure cash. And so when they bought YouTube, people were like, boy, I don't know. And today that's like one of the smartest purchases made, in the last 20 years.
Absolutely. And it looked like so yeah, that was what was insane. People saw that deal and it looked insane because YouTube was not profitable. It was losing tons of money, right? Back then, the bandwidth costs, server costs, storage costs, it was a dog, right? But Google was probably one of the few companies that had the deep pockets to stand that kind of a loss. But this is what true vision is. They knew the trend of technology getting cheaper, like bandwidth getting cheaper, hard drives getting cheaper, and so on. They also knew as that curve went down, the cost of delivering the service went down. And, most digital delivery systems, they trend towards zero cost or fractions of pennies, right? Which is near enough zero. So they knew that was going to happen. And at the same time, they could also see a trend where marketing and advertising revenues were moving online. So they could see the revenue line dramatically increasing over time and their cost base diminishing to almost zero. So they must have done a calculation and thought, okay, at some point in time, those lines are going to cross. Yeah, that's the point where we're going to be breaking even. However, the costs are going to continue to climb towards zero as the revenues go into the stratosphere, right? And that's exactly what happened. Now, the comparison between how much YouTube can charge for their advertising versus the cost of delivering the videos is so wide, it's like a hugely, hugely profitable business. But that requires two things. One, the deep pockets to stand that kind of a loss for that amount of time, and also the foresight to see that far into the future.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So when we look at Bitcoin, kind of thinking about so YouTube is this underlying infrastructure of the video, right? The video is just a piece. When we look at Bitcoin, kind of the blockchain technology is that underlying delivery platform. So some people think that the blockchain itself is a bigger deal than Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Do you think that's true, and if so, why?
Okay. Well, I hear a lot these days about there being a risk of us moving into, what do they call it, a society of post-truth, right? And I see a portion of society thinking that everything's relative, they say. There's no such thing as right or wrong, and there's no good or bad. It's all a matter of, subjective perception and stuff like this. Well, blockchain technology, at its very core, it provides an objective record of the truth, right? That cannot be denied because it's recorded in a blockchain, which is essentially a database that's distributed all across the internet that cannot be changed on a whim. So it is literally a record of the truth that everybody agrees on. So as random and as chaotic as our universe may seem at first glance, it's still based on certain constants, like mathematical constants, gravity, the speed of light, pi, and so on. And there has to be a foundation that never changes in order for anything to be built on top of it. So the universe is built on those kind of mathematical constants. And you take any process in the world that requires this unchangeable record of the truth, and they can use that as the base and build a blockchain on it and apply it to that industry. So, most industries could benefit from agreeing on what the truth is and what happened in history. So in that regard, blockchain technology is, it's a truth technology. So however valuable it is to know what's true and what's false, that's how valuable blockchain technology is.
It might be a reason, as much as it seems like government and the state doesn't like Bitcoin, that they probably like this constant record of the undeniable truth even less.
Yes, yes, indeed. What we get taught in school about history, for example, we assume that's all been fact-checked and it doesn't have any bias or hidden agenda behind it. Again, when we're children, how do we know any different? We are at the complete mercy of our parents, our teachers, and our educators.
Well, you believe what your parents tell you, right? Now,
right.
Add to that they believe what they're telling you. Mm-hmm. And the level of propaganda success is extremely high.
Right. I agree. The way I say that is that it's kind of, this is a funny dichotomy. It's the fault of our parents, but it's not their responsibility. Right? And the way I reconcile that is that the fact of the matter is that parents don't know everything there is to know about living. They can't, right? Until we reach an enlightened society where we're raising children with enlightened parents that don't ever make a mistake or have no mental delusions whatsoever, that's going to happen. We're all going to get conditioned with some kind of limitations, right? But that's fine, because otherwise we'd have nothing to do in life, right? We'd have no personal growth to do. So, yeah, while our parents, teachers, and educators did kind of install a lot of limitations in us, that just gives me a project to work on. I could treat my personal growth as a project. And another principle of mine is you never blame the person, you blame the system. Because that's our parents and we are products of the system. And it's the system that is flawed, not the people. They're also a slave to the system, which is why the system needs to change.
Gotcha, man. So if Bitcoin was born in 2009 and it's as good as you and I think it is, why isn't it more mainstream adopted today? I think in some ways it is, because there's so many ways that you can use it, so many places you can spend it with merchants and things like that. But in other ways, so comparing it to PayPal, right? I remember when I got my first PayPal debit card. And I would go into it was a MasterCard debit card or a Visa debit card. I don't remember which one it was, but it was one or the other. And you'd go into a place and they would take it because it was a debit card, or you could run it as a credit card. But just the fact that it said PayPal on it, they'd look at it a little funny, like, oh, that's that weird online PayPal thing, like almost like a little skeptical. Today, almost everybody out there has a PayPal account, unless for some reason they hate PayPal, right? Okay, they either have one or they hate PayPal. Bitcoin, you know, going from 2009 to today, and you think, well, all I can think about 2009 is, gee, I wish I would have believed in this thing in 2009 and put like 10 grand in it, because I wouldn't be I'd be fishing and say what now or stuff right now. But it hasn't, even with its success, it hasn't really caught on. Why do you think that is?
I like your comparison to PayPal, because it's really funny that what happened to PayPal when they started out and the way it was tarnished as a scam and all this sort of stuff is exactly the same rhetoric that's being applied to Bitcoin. I think back, the phishing emails and fraud and people posing as PayPal, it was quite popular in the early days of the internet when, I suppose most people are naive to phishing scams now, but when the internet first came along and we just started getting used to buying online, the favorite tactic of the scammers was to pretend to send you emails from PayPal. And that really, I believe, tarnished PayPal's brand for many, many years and almost had the PayPal brand synonymous with, PayPal, that's
scam.
That. Now, that is exactly the same propaganda that's happening to Bitcoin right now, which I think it's almost identical, right? But now PayPal is the kind of the standard accepted, PayPal, of course everyone uses that. And Bitcoin's exhibiting the sort of same, being the victim of the same thing. So the question of why hasn't Bitcoin hit that level of adoption yet, I kind of struggle to define what mainstream adoption would look like. I often ask people this, and I guess the consensus is like as soon as your average grandma can use it on their phone, right? That would be when Bitcoin has made it to the masses. There's another thing here, though. Again, on a higher level, like every system, whether it's a belief system or a financial system, will resist change, right? Because systems resist change because change brings a certain amount of instability. And instability brings with it the possibility, however small, that the old system will die, right? And the old system doesn't want to die. So it has a life of its own, and it wants to preserve its life. And being the survival podcast, I'm sure everyone can relate to that. That's
sure.
What we do. So while I have a certain amount of compassion for the dying, it is an inevitable part of life, right?
Yeah.
So the old system is kind of resisting the inevitable. So with that said, the existing financial system is actively resisting the change to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, which is kind of like, the analogy I would give to that is, imagine strapping weights to the legs of a baby while it's trying to learn to walk, right? It's kind of holding, that's cruel, but that's kind of what's happening with the existing financial system. Bitcoin is still very young and it's trying to find its feet and it's trying to learn to walk and talk and so on. And there's active resistance to it, and it's completely unfair because there's this big behemoth financial system and this little baby, Bitcoin, and the cryptocurrency industry that's being suppressed, repressed, whatever you want to call it. So I think that's a lot to do with it. I mean, imagine the difference if the mainstream financial system, even half of it, got behind Bitcoin. It would be a whole different story.
Well, yeah, there's a big reason they don't want to. They make money every time money moves, and this stops that. And I think that's part of why they didn't like PayPal at first, but then they kind of looked at PayPal and went, oh, they're just sort of like they're this hybrid between a merchant account and a bank account, and most people are going to link their bank accounts to it, and they're going to be moving money in and out of the bank back and forth through PayPal. That means it doesn't really change the system, so we don't need to fight this thing so much. And I think the biggest contribution PayPal made to the world was empowering entrepreneurs. Because in 5 minutes you could have a website set up and be charging customers. And whether they had a PayPal account or not didn't matter. They could use their credit card and pay you through PayPal, and that also made the banks happy. I guess the closest corollary to PayPal in the Bitcoin world is Coinbase, and they've made it much. I use them to take Bitcoin on the Survival Podcast website, but there's nowhere near the advantage for the existing system to accept Bitcoin unless they fully embrace it and use it themselves. That's the only way it really works for them. And man, you're talking about jobs being lost and all, and the people making decisions might be the ones losing jobs. It's a big hurdle. I used to work for a company out of the UK, honestly, called Syrian, that did website optimization for the cellular networks, and it was a product you sold at the C level, but you're selling it to people that maybe won't put them out of business, out of work, but it's going to put like half their department out of work. Right. Not real hip on it.
Exactly.
Partly because they have a heart and partly because of self-preservation.
Right. Which also, I'll argue there that it's also a lack of vision. Because this concept, I don't know where I got this from, it's not my own phrase, but I call it creative destruction. And it basically goes like this. If you're not actively, you as a company, if you're not actively working to make your current business model irrelevant, someone else will.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. So Bill Gates, I think, said something like the only companies that will survive in the modern era will be those that obsolete their own products before their competitors do.
That's creative destruction right there. So why didn't Visa, MasterCard, or the banking system create Bitcoin would be the question.
Yeah.
Lack of vision would be my answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and it's difficult to see. Yes, it's going to transform the system. Yes, it's going to make certain jobs obsolete, but it's also going to create a whole new industry. Like I tell you, the thing that the cryptocurrency industry is short of is developers. So for every banker that goes out of gets made obsolete or redundant, well, they can reskill as a developer. And there is an argument against that. People say, well, you're going to lose 2 banker jobs for every 1 developer. I don't buy it. I don't buy that, to be honest. Because if you're entrepreneurial, you'll create your own job.
That's the key. I think that's one of the biggest tidal waves coming with all of these different leverages of new technology, automation, artificial intelligence, things like that. No, there won't be 1 new job created for every 1 lost, but there'll be probably 2 opportunities created for every job lost. But you're going to have to reach out, grab that opportunity, and make something out of it. Someone's not going to do that for you and go, right, here's, you were making $80K over here, now here's $80K over here, here's your benefits package, off you go. That's not going to happen.
Right. Exactly. Because that kind of stuff, pension, benefits package, etc., that's actually based in the old financial system.
Yeah.
With exchange-traded funds, retirement funds traded on the stock market, all this kind of stuff. You have to stop thinking like that because the whole paradigm changes in the cryptocurrency space.
Now, you've said something that I think is maybe a bigger reason for resistance than the stuff we've been talking about itself. You've said that there'll be a transition from vertically integrated organizations to networked organizations that's gradually going to transform society. And what that means is you're taking power from a consolidation point and distributing power evenly across a platform so that everybody kind of has maybe not the same results but the same opportunity at the table.
Right.
That seems like something that if you are in the business of monopoly, you're not real hip about. So can you kind of describe this transition and what that's going to look like in your opinion?
Of course. It's kind of at odds with biology because in biology, in apes and so on, there's actually positive brain chemicals that are associated with being the alpha. So as we climb up the hierarchy in the animal kingdom, you get rewarded with dopamine and all the positive brain chemicals. So we are biologically rigged to seize power, right? That's why politicians, bankers, it leads to corruption because you want more power. Just like a drug, the more you get of it, the more you get of it, the more you need of it, the more you want it, etc. So, and there's no end to it, and it just becomes cancerous, right? So that's why you would resist the dissemination of power into a network-style organization. However, I believe this is a natural part of the evolution of our society that cannot be stopped because it's just going to happen. It's just that it's our time. If you look through civilization and just the different parts of history and how societies transform over time, this is just the next thing, right? I don't think it's ever been done before because we haven't been this evolved before. So I'll start here by saying, again, I start off with a premise that we live in a universe of opposites. Everything is defined by its opposite. So the pair of opposites that applies in this particular topic is like the subjective and the objective. So objective meaning something that is always the case in every case. So you drop the same hammer from 1 meter off the ground in Los Angeles, in Fiji, and it will hit the ground in exactly the same amount of time every time, right? Doesn't matter if you're black, white, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's objective. So we can say that objective is what is true for everybody, right? And then the subjective, meaning what is true for each individual. And this would be, say, my personal opinions, my preferences, my point of view, how I see the world, right? That's almost the complete opposite in the sense that it differs from one person to the next. Now, for centuries, I'd say since the invention of the scientific method, we've been running on the assumption that everything can be discovered and known by devising and running some kind of scientific experiment and studying the world out there, right? And that would be the 100% objective view of the world, right? We figure out how the world works and then we adjust our actions accordingly. So from that point of view, what you would end up with is these vertically integrated organizations, hierarchies of power where the guy at the top knows the truth, right? And makes the decisions for everyone else. And then everyone just gets on with it. No matter whether they can see something else that might be valuable, right? Person on the shop floor facing the customer day to day might notice that people are tending to not be able to reach a particular product on the top shelf. I might think, well, why don't you put it on the next shelf down, right? The boss isn't going to listen to that, right? You're just a subordinate on the shop floor, right? Because they know, right? They know, even though they don't know. This actually even leads to, that thinking even leads to companies operating out of these high-rise buildings. That actually mirrors the very worldview of organization charts. You know, the guy in the penthouse, the top floor, he's the most important with the most power. And you start in the mailroom, which is like the ground floor. It's literally...
Or in the basement, right?
You know what I'm saying? At the basement, even worse, like in the server room or something.
Yeah.
It's literally the physical manifestation of the way we think about it, right? So, I mean, that's a very literal, nothing metaphysical about that. The mental models, the thoughts we use about the world end up becoming the world in that sense. If you think in hierarchies, you build in hierarchies. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, more recently, though, we've seen that this purely objective approach has some limitations because there are certain aspects to our experience that are very individual, right, and not easily explainable by any kind of repeatable experiment, and that's the individual point of view that we have on the world, right? So it means that the way we see the world affects how we interact with it, but then our actions in turn have an impact on the world and changes the world. So there's this kind of two-way relationship. There's a give and take. There's like a two-way flow of information between the world out there that we go out and experience, but then we go, we respond to it and we act on the world, start a business, insult somebody, whatever. That actually changes the world out there. So we give information back, that changes the world, we then look at the world again, and there's this give and take, right? This to and fro. So, in order to align with that way of seeing the world, where there's this balance between the subjective and the objective, the very structure of organizations needs to change to a much more dynamic approach to allow this give and take between, you know, the objective out there and the subjective in here, which I'm pointing to my chest right now. So that's what a networked organization would do. It would flatten everything down. Everyone still has a different role, but the idea that one individual or even a board of directors making decisions for the whole organization isn't very wise, since that CEO only has one point of view, one set of eyes, one set of ears, you know, and so on, or even a board of directors only has a very limited perspective on the world, versus, let's use Walmart, millions of employees, millions of eyeballs, millions of ears, all over the country, right? All that data coming through human beings that can't easily be put in a graph or a spreadsheet, and you can't really act on that information in the same way that an individual could. Seeing someone in the shop, can't reach the product, and literally the next time they're stacking the shelves, they put the toilet roll on the next shelf down, right? Boom. Instant solution to the problem based on real-world problem they saw in the store.
You know, you're making me laugh. I was just telling my wife yesterday, I don't know what brought it up, but I said, you know, we used to have kind of these satirical sayings back when I was in corporate America in the grind, and one of them was, simple solutions to complex problems will not be tolerated in this organization, right? We just can't have that, but that's kind of what we're talking about, but having accuracy, because as you said, blockchain technology is a truth teller. Like, if something's really occurring over and over again, well, then we can audit it and we can look at it. And if we make the claim that it's occurring and it's not, as long as we develop some mechanism to gather that data, then we can say, well, this is a perception, not a reality. And that really does kind of lessen the value of the CEO, because now it's much less a judgment and far more a decision based on fact that any reasonably educated human being might be able to make. They can't reach it. That's why they're not buying it. So move it down there. And that's just one example. Can you talk more about how, like, this concept would specifically impact and improve the well-being of an individual on a day-to-day basis? Why should anybody care?
It's a good question. So I'd say from an individual on a day-to-day basis, say let's use work as the example, it would lead to a way of working where we as individuals would have a lot more autonomy, a lot more creative freedom to use like our individual gifts, talents, and abilities. That's that subjective thing. I honestly believe that every individual has a unique recipe of gifts, talents, and abilities and strengths that nobody else has in the same combination. You might share this gift or that talent with someone else, but the actual individual recipe that you possess is 100% individual, which means there is a specific role for you to play in the world. There are specific problems, perspectives that only you have. It's just a question of finding it, like, your podcast the other day was talking about. So it will create a much more fertile environment, and I use the word environment carefully there, for each of us to then maximize our potential. And I have this, a person is the seed, and if you have a tropical seed and you plant it in the United Kingdom, you ain't going to get no plant, right? You ain't going to grow no bananas, no pineapples, right? The seed has the potential to become coconut tree, right? You plant it in the wrong environment, but it's not fertile, nothing's going to happen.
Gotcha.
Right? There's nothing wrong with the seed. There's nothing wrong with the environment. It's just simply a mismatch. So the human with the gifts, talents, and abilities, that's the seed of potential. It's just a case that the environment is not ripe, right? We have these hierarchical infrastructures with these egotistical bosses who, won't take feedback from people. And so I'm stereotyping a bit there.
Well, hold on, let me help you with that, because even if you had the most benevolent organization in a company that truly did actually read the cards that went into the suggestion box instead of using them as, they throw them in the shredder and use them for the kids' gerbils at home or something. And they did everything they could. The structure itself is inadequate to allow each individual to fully express what their talents are for that organization. It can't function that way because it can't. It's like trying to put, if you try to put 10,000 cars on a 2-lane road at one time, it doesn't work. You get a traffic jam. You need a much different infrastructure for that number of vehicles to move.
Right. That harks back earlier on when I was saying, never blame the person, blame the system. It's not the CEO's fault. It's when you say it's a systemic problem, it's a problem with the system that everyone's participating in. So it's that. Even giving someone permission to do something, that's a problem. You shouldn't have to ask for permission.
Oh, God, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Google's done a reasonably good job of this, which is one of the reasons why I think they've been so successful. People tend to think, well, of course Google can have beanbags and coloured offices and free organic food in the cafe, and they've got the money to do it. And I think, no. I think it might be the other way around. I think it might be the fantastic creative ideas that come out of Google are because they have created this fertile environment for the human potential to flourish, right? And it requires the vision. And I suppose selecting the right people and putting them in the right places to get the plants that you want, to use that metaphor.
Right? Got you, man. If people want to accelerate this move, speed it up, get us to networked organizations faster, what actions can they take to try to precipitate that?
Better question, because it loops us right back to the world of cryptocurrencies. Because in my view, that is the single best way to do this. And blockchain technology has given rise to what we in the industry call DAOs, DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations. Now there was something called the DAO, but that's only one specific project that hijacked the name. To me, that was daft because it's almost like calling your company the internet. It just doesn't make any sense. So that just tends to confuse people. A DAO is a thing, like a network. It's not a company. So then calling their project that was didn't make much sense to me. Anyway, a DAO is one of these networked organizations. Anyone can set one up, and it provides this decentralized, flat management structure that spreads the power to make decisions and to run the organization across a whole crowd of people, rather than just a board of directors who are sat in some high-rise building far away, disconnected from their customers, right? And there's actually a platform that some smart people have built for this. It's called Wings. If you want to check that out, it's Wings.ai, I think it's called. And what they've done is they've built a toolkit to allow you to just go on there and set up your own DAO, right? You could do it if you wanted to do like a crowdfund. You could create a DAO for the specific thing, a non-profit, anything. The only prerequisite for starting a DAO is having a project with a purpose. And then you put it out there, and if enough people think that's a good idea, if it's a problem they think needs solving, some people put money behind it, the DAO is born. It may last 25,000 years, it might last 2 years until the project's complete. That is also, I just thought of this actually, that's another thing that I think is a problem with the existing way that we approach the economy. It's almost like we don't want to categorically solve problems. We just want profit. So what we do is we start businesses and business models that will sustain profit rather than solve the problem out. So the best types of businesses, not the best types, but the best types of businesses for profit are ones that sell, remedies for symptoms, whether that be health or otherwise, right?
Sure, if you're a drug company and you cure a disease, you put yourself out of business. Right, but if you treat a disease, you make billions of dollars.
Exactly. So just like a drug dealer, right, on the street, you make money on the comeback. Like every time the person comes back. And the more addicted they get, the more they'll pay because it's excruciating not to. So that's another one of those creative destruction things. And again, it's based on a lack of vision. If the history of humanity has taught us anything, is that today's problems are actually the result of yesterday's solutions. And that chain of cause and effect is going to continue forever. So every time we invent something that seems like, a miracle solution, well, it gives way to a new set of problems. It's an Einstein quote, I think it is, where he says we can't solve problems at the level of thinking we were at when we created them. So
absolutely,
that would be like, okay, let's fossil fuels, right? Look at this release of energy, great, cool. But then of course that has its own knock-on effects like polluting the seas or tanker crashes and causes an ecological disaster or whatever. And again, okay, that's maybe not such a good idea. So we're always in the process of becoming. So to think there's going to be I don't think a utopia is we're never going to arrive, because that would mean that the evolution of society would cease. We're always going to, even cryptocurrencies, they seem like the greatest thing since sliced bread right now, but they're going to give birth to a whole other set of problems, right?
Yeah.
So there'll always be something for us to do as humans. There'll always be more problems to solve, more creativity to be exhibited, more gifts, talents, and abilities to be applied, and that's my attitude. It makes me an optimist because I'm like, hey, I'm never going to retire. I'm never going to retire. Not for meaningful projects anyway. I'm always going to be working on the next thing. And I pride myself on genuinely trying to attack problems at the root to categorically solve them. Even though, like I just said, it will give birth to a whole new problem. But at least that one's nailed and I can move on to another one.
Absolutely. When all this talk, you're kind of making me think about something that's beginning to develop now. I started talking about this concept before there was one. I'm sure work was already going on to make them, but the concept of like a virtual nation. BitNation's the one that I think, I don't know that any of them have got, you were talking earlier too, you're talking about the mind can go faster than we can actually get there. So, way back before any of these things surfaced, I was describing all these things they could do. So when they showed up, I'm like, great. And I'm like, okay, do the stuff. Like, enable the things that I was talking about. I was like, there's no reason, if you and I went into business together for some type of a contract, and we got into a situation where there was a breach of that contract, I felt it, or you felt that it wasn't being honored. If that was done in a blockchain environment, there's no need for the state's court system. Right. That system can be completely fair enough. Even if there's a subjective component to it, an arbitrator through that system would be far more fair, far more impartial, far more likely to give us a result that we would both be able to live with. So arbitration could move to the blockchain, marriage could move to the blockchain, identification, affiliations, all of these things could move into a blockchain-like environment and essentially create virtual nations. And when I came up with this thought and put it out publicly on the air, my own listeners, that will never work, that can't happen. And my point was, if you get a large enough block of human beings in one thing doing business one way, then other human beings will want to do business with them, right? And you'll get recognition and you'll get validation purely through numbers, even in their system. So sure, maybe the U.S. government and the U.K. government wouldn't be too hip on this, but if you had 100 million people that said they were citizens of, Chris Coney land,
Coney Island.
Right, Coney Island, right? Then countries like Ecuador or something might think there's some value to be gained there, and all of a sudden you start getting actual peer-to-peer recognition from a recognized state. Not necessarily what you really want, but maybe you need it to go forward and advance to the next level. What are your thoughts on like virtual nations and what can be done with that type of world?
That's a good little spiel there, actually, you did. Because that's already happened. Julian Assange is an Ecuadorian citizen actually living in the UK.
Yeah.
In the embassy. So he's physically on the land mass that we call the United Kingdom, England, London, but he's actually an Ecuadorian citizen. What the hell's going on there, right?
Yeah.
So it's all virtual as it is. It's just a piece of paper that says this guy is a citizen of Ecuador, and he's a little piece of Ecuador right in the middle of London. What is that, right? That is already a kind of a virtual extension of the Ecuadorian nation, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm not quite sure where this will lead. The one thing I will say about this virtual nation stuff is that what's a nation? It's just a governance system. It's a set of rules by which we want to be governed. And I guess traditionally a nation is a landmass, like Germany or England or Ireland or whatever. And when you're in that geographic boundary, you are bound by these rules. But just because you are on that particular soil, the rules and the laws of the land, as they're called, they're not laws of the land. The laws aren't in the soil. It's not in the land itself, right? It's just that that's what the consensus is, or the governing body has decided that is the rule of law. But what's to say that you couldn't voluntarily opt into a different set of standards? And what's that got to do with the piece of the earth that I'm stood on? Nothing. Not really, right? I watched an interesting YouTube video that's based on a book about how you could privatize the legal system and how we could each voluntarily opt into the legal system that operated based on how we prefer it to work. And I guess smart contracts are a good way to do that. And like you were saying with these third-party arbitrators, like if you and I fell out and we had a contract that was in a smart contract, and even if there was a bit of ambiguity there, you would have this anonymous third-party arbitrator that would judge on it, right? A randomly selected person who would get paid for it because there'd be a bit of a piece in the transaction for them, and they would just look at the facts and decide. And then we would accept the results and get on with our lives, right?
And we would probably both then, within the blockchain itself, rate that as were we treated fairly? Because obviously if I lose, I'm not going to like the outcome. But if the arbitrator does a good job, then most of the time I'm going to admit that I was treated fairly. And I found a lot of times private arbitration, what ends up happening is the two parties end up going, yeah, we can come. It never even finishes. Because as a legitimate third party that's not an arm of the state that's just there to be paid and to enforce a ruling, an arbitrator should be in there not to decide who's right, but to help arbitrate the disagreement. And as soon as that starts to happen, a lot of times I go, you know what, Chris, you're right on this point. Can you concede on that? Yeah, okay, let's do that, and we're done. And then we both have a very positive. So the better arbitrator is going to be the one that people want to select, because when I see that, this arbitrator has a 5-star rating, let's say, for people that won, well, that's great. But if I see he has like a 4-star rating for people that lost, I want that guy, right? And I think that, then you get into things like, well, what if you and I have chosen different legal systems, but we somehow collide? Well, then that's another place where a third-party arbitrator can say, there are universal constants. You can't steal Chris's stuff, right? Even your own legal system says you can't steal Chris's stuff, right? So that would be an incredible opportunity, I think, and if you want to talk about resistant stuff, right? You think the banking system doesn't like the ideas we're talking about. Imagine if you're the state and you start to realize, like, the way I feel it is they're like, they know. They know it's all bullshit. They know it's all a lie. They know that we're controlling them with an illusion, and they're starting to develop their own clear pathway toward self-governance. And that's got to be terrifying if you're a bureaucrat.
Yes. There's a video on YouTube that's called The Story of Your Enslavement.
Yep.
And actually, you've ever seen this?
Yes.
Okay, Stephen Molyneux, right?
Yeah.
And he chronicles how governments systematically created greater and greater illusions of freedom, right? It looked like greater and greater freedoms, but it was literally because there was some resistance from the people. So they thought, okay, let's give them a bit of rope, right? Let's make them feel a bit freer so they'll stay compliant, right?
Yeah.
The trouble is that, over time, they've had to let more and more of the rope out, right? And now we're stood way away from them, right? Like if you think of a dog on a leash, right? We are stood miles away and quite a lot of freedom, and they may be out of rope, right? So if we tug on it, they might actually let go of the rope because there's no more, there's no more rope left.
Absolutely, and they figured out over time how to get the slave to feed himself and clothe himself and take care of his own medical needs and all under the illusion of greater freedom, but yet in some ways greater control. I mean, if you think of what a state can do to one of its citizens today just because it becomes displeased with them, without arresting them, just basically making it impossible. Asset forfeiture. Where do you go to fight that? Well, you don't. You now have the burden of proving innocence rather than them having the burden of proving guilt, even though you've been convicted of nothing. Like that's. But if your assets are secured with a mnemonic device in this mystical ether in the form of a cryptocurrency, well, good luck.
Yes.
Good luck.
That brings me on to, like, our identities are virtual in this world. So how do we identify ourselves? With government documents.
Yes.
Right? My passport, my driving license, it's all an identity granted to me by the government. So, and given that we're increasingly having digital records, like Andreas Antonopoulos says, if you join the wrong protest or you say the wrong thing, boom, switch, you no longer exist as a person. You talk about identity theft. That's like identity deletion.
Yeah. Huh. Oof. It's to me, it's why I'm very encouraged that the government did resist this and that the corporatocracy did resist this, because I feel like now the genie's way too far out of the bottle, where even if they embrace it, like they can't own it. It's like, I don't know if you know this or not, the U.S. government tried to take over email way back in the day. And it was already, there was like, 20 or 30 private email providers when they thought, and they were going to charge per message, and they thought people would pay them because they would get the assurance of government with it. And it was just like, we don't need that. But had they gone first, it's conceivable they might own email today. So the fact that they resisted it is a blessing, because if they hadn't, then there wouldn't be, 10,000 independent geniuses out there developing different platforms to use this stuff.
Yes. I don't think that would have worked anyway, because once the email protocol was out there, just like a cryptocurrency, if the state gets their hand on Bitcoin, everyone will just move.
Yeah.
Instantly, all the value will switch to another one.
Yeah. Yeah, because they'll devalue it. That's why it's valuable. It's valuable because you don't touch it. So if you touch it, you'll dilute the value to nothing, and everybody will leave.
Now that's the problem, you see. That's inherently resilient.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it. It's like a slippery bar of soap. The harder you grip it, the quicker it shoots out of your hand.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, man. So, one of the core values of this podcast is self-sufficiency. How are the things you're talking about going to help people become more self-sufficient?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, Bitcoin in particular established like a new economy of its own based on a fundamentally different paradigm. So I have this diagram in my mind. It's imagine a circle on the left, a big circle, that would represent the old economy with fiat currencies and the old banking system. And that includes all the world currencies, the dollars and the pounds and the euros, the yen, all of the paper-based currencies that aren't actually backed by anything other than the fact that they have, a stamp on it that says the Bank of England or, the Federal Reserve System and all that sort of stuff, right? It's not backed by anything other than the fact that we all agree to accept that as payment. That's really the only thing that gives it value. And it kind of gains value by that increasing consensus, but it can also lose it. If one by one, I was like, I don't take dollars anymore, right? And then another. The value of it starts to go down because it's less useful. That's actually the opposite of what's happening to new currencies like Bitcoin, is that every time a new person accepts its payment, it becomes more useful, and it's a virtuous cycle. Not only that economic activity, someone buying a nail care or facial, whatever it is at their local beauty salon, they used to transact that economic value in dollars. But that's still going on. It's just exited the old financial system, which then we have this big circle on the left. There's now this new little circle on the right. It's an entirely different economy that exists outside of the economy that we've always known. And this is weird, because this has never happened before. We've been trapped inside that left bubble, that big circle. No matter where you go, you move your money here, there, everywhere, exchange it for this, that, the other, you're still in that prison because there's no alternative. And what the cryptocurrency economy has done, it's kind of opened a little tiny door next to it, and there's this other bubble that's just bumping up against it. It's tiny right now, but there's a slow leak now of economic activity where people are voluntarily, interestingly, leaving that old system and joining the new system. And you can't say, no one can say, that they voluntarily chose the economic system that we have.
No.
If there's only one choice, it's not really a choice, is it now?
No, that's that mythical social contract they keep telling me about that I've never seen nor signed.
I've not signed it. Actually, that's actually valid in UK law. Because
Really?
the Queen has to sign everything into law.
Okay.
There's actually, I've got this book. It's by someone anonymous who calls himself the Lioness. And it's called something like, "So You Think You've Broken the Law." And it points out these fundamental systemic flaws in UK law that if you don't recognise the Queen's authority, all the laws are invalid, right? It sounds ridiculous, but it's a very simple pocketbook, and it gives you all of the legalese that if you get pulled over, you can basically say, the law doesn't apply to me because I don't recognise the Queen's authority. It's quite interesting stuff, and that's kind of what you're talking about. Where I never signed a piece of paper to say I would be bound by the royal family or whatever, right? And it's specific to the UK because the Queen has to sign every statute. If I haven't given her that authority to speak for me, the law doesn't apply. So I have no legal expertise to validate that, but it's a very interesting idea, to say the least. So where was I? Yeah. So the old financial system, right? It's very much about giving your money or your financial destiny to someone else to take care of. It's kind of the opposite of self-sufficiency, right? And there's a kind of famous guy in the Bitcoin industry, Andreas Antonopoulos, and he says, if history has proved anything, it's that if you give a company your money and they hold on to it, they'll eventually try and steal it. That's just the way it goes, right? Because it's a resource, and they'll just, human nature, it'll corrupt them and they'll try and steal it from you. So the Bitcoin economy at its very foundation requires us to take responsibility for ourselves, like our decisions and our money. And that new way of thinking, it can have very, very positive knock-on effects. So once you get into the mindset of, okay, I have to take responsibility for my money, securing it, make sure I spend it wisely and all this kind of stuff. Once you shifted your mindset to, well, I am responsible for my own self-sufficiency in terms of finance, that mindset can then start have a knock-on effect, and you start thinking, maybe I should take charge of my own health or my relationships, and you start to become a much more empowered individual. So I see that as very positive. While I am a cryptocurrency advocate, I also am doing it with intent that convincing you to switch to a Bitcoin paradigm for money will actually help you in numerous other ways. Like the tagline for the podcast is to help you when times get tough, or even if they don't. So becoming more resilient, more self-sufficient, that's critical if there's a crisis, But even if there isn't a crisis, you'll actually end up with a far better quality of life, even if everything just stays the same.
Absolutely. And one of the things I try to drive home about Bitcoin, I don't think people fully understand yet, the rules of production are known. And you mentioned a statement earlier. Every time a person decides to start using it, it becomes more useful. It becomes better. Yes. It actually becomes better. Mm-hmm. Well, it also becomes more valuable.
Yes.
Right? Because it has to. Because math. That's why. Right? Because once you realize that there's this finite number, and the number that can be mined per year is declining rapidly at this point, and there's only so much of it, the way it becomes functional, like if we try to do this with gold, it wouldn't work because there's too many people. But the way Bitcoin works, it's almost infinitesimally fractionable. So you send smaller and smaller pieces of Bitcoin to rate the same value. Well, so this is a deflationary currency, meaning it grows in value over time. Which, if you want to really freak out they've built everything on a deflationary economy, right? They've built, I'm so sorry, they've built everything on an inflationary economy. They've built everything they've done on the concept that money will be worth less tomorrow than it is today. They've built our need to invest in our retirement in a certain way on that model. Like you have to risk your money, because if you don't, it will be worth less by the time you retire.
By default.
By default. So you must risk your money. Where imagine a world where your money you actually are earning interest by keeping your money in a virtual mattress. And that's powerful. And when you start to understand it that way, and people say, well, Bitcoin just went down, 10%. And I don't care. That's not, frankly, it's been going up and up and up recently, but I'm sure there'll be other volatilities, but the long-term trend, unless people stop using it, can only go one direction. As more people use it, the value per unit must go up because it becomes more and more scarce.
Correct.
But it can't run out because we just can send, a billionth of a piece if we had to.
That's right. It can be broken into, every Bitcoin can be broken into 100 million pieces.
Yeah.
Which means the day a single Bitcoin is worth $1 million, it means the smallest unit, which is a single Satoshi, would be about a penny.
Isn't that great? We can only hope, right? So we also talk about liberty a lot here. And we kind of touched on it some with like the virtual nations, but can you speak to how the blockchain, cryptocurrencies, et cetera, help the cause of liberty?
Liberty, yes, indeed. So like I was saying about the rise of these DAOs, these decentralized autonomous organizations, which are flatter in nature. And so cryptocurrencies do away with the idea of these central control structures that are so easily abused, as we've been talking about, and corrupted, and are instead replaced by individual sovereignty. That's the word I like to use. And sovereignty meaning like you having the rights and ownership of yourself. Right? You own your own body, right? No one else does. And you get to say what goes into it, food and everything else. And you get to say where it goes, like in a cage or not in a cage, right? That's what the government and the police have the authority to do, which is a lack of sovereignty. If they can take your body, which is your possession, and put it in a cage, I'm talking about a jail, well, that's not sovereignty, is it now, right?
No.
You know what I'm saying? So, now, the idea of liberty and sovereignty, that doesn't guarantee prosperity, right? There's a key distinction there. But it does mean that success or failure, you will have the power in your own hands. And to me, that's the absolute key. So that sovereignty is the key. And financial sovereignty, the ownership and the provable ownership of your possessions, whether it's Bitcoin or eventually when we get land and property titles on the blockchain, it's that record of truth. Who owns this house, right? How do we categorically prove it? And how do we put it in a database, a blockchain, which is unchangeable unless the owner, signs that transaction to say, I have sold Jack my house. I hereby transfer ownership to him now, right? And I sign it and it was me, it's cryptographically proven, boom, right? No way to corrupt that. And again, that's now your house. It's publicly available, no one can get in there and and change the land title, kick you out of your land because it's an immutable record of the truth, and you can see who owned that house. Ever since it was built, who it was transferred, the ownership, when, and you can guarantee that every previous owner gave permission to transfer the ownership.
And your title company is no longer necessary, and that multi-$1,000 component to buying a property is no longer necessary.
Right, great point. So the way to think about what's a blockchain? Well, think of any industry where the whole industry is based on being a middleman. That's like anything with agency in the title, right? Record label, what did we just do? Property company, any intermediary, anyone in between the two people doing the actual transaction, that whole industry can be replaced by a blockchain.
I mean, that's, Cell 411 is doing that in an app environment, but I think that we can do that so much broader. Because if I want to do business with you and you want to do business with me, what need do we really have of anything other than that? And then if we do that, and what I believe is we're going to go to a trust-based system where Chris has done business with Jack, and Chris says, stand-up guy gave me exactly what I expected. Kind of like Amazon reviews, but a much bigger, not just in that one platform, like this is across the board. And if I have 30 or 40 people that I've done business with, and you can look and see not only that they all give me high trust, but they have trust from their interactions with others, all of a sudden you don't need anybody to tell you, well, Jack's okay to do business with. I don't need a license by the state to say that I'm good to do business with, because all that means is I've ticked some boxes and paid them their money. It doesn't actually mean that I'm good at what I do. But if my customers say that I'm not only am I good at what I do, but I keep my word, then you can trust me to do business with me. And in essence, all the people that have done business with me and all the people that have done business with the people who've done business with me have now replaced that strict hierarchy you were talking about. Instead of this one almighty person that says, I have stamped his card, and taken a smoke break and waited, an hour before stamping the next card. Instead of that authority, the authority is now spread out.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. Wow, I was really listening intently to you there. I lost my train of thought.
That's okay, man. I want to actually talk a little bit about your website and your educational platform you have, Cryptoversity.com. Can you tell us what that's about and what people will find if they go there?
Sure. If you can go to Cryptoversity.com, you'll find a range of courses that I've created with my very fair hands. And the little quip about Cryptoversity is that you can get paid to learn. So the latest course I've released, part of the course, you get to the point of learning about the basics of how to receive a Bitcoin transaction. And included with the course is you get a portion of the fee you pay sent back to you in Bitcoin. So you pay with a credit card, right? And then you get to the certain point where it's like, I need to experience receiving Bitcoin for the first time. And the best person to send you something is me. So you just send me an email and you say, can I have the free Bitcoin that comes with this course, please? And then I send it to the wallet that you just set up as part of the course. So it's kind of a nice, cute little way of giving people the real experience, and also getting them their first Bitcoin in a way that where they don't have to trust anybody, right? And they've already kind of trusted me with the course in the first place, but it's a real experiential way of learning. So I've got a course on, if you want to know the technical aspects of how the whole economic side of things works. I've got another one which is just about, okay, never mind the techie bits. How do I make money and save money with Bitcoin? Just tell me that, right? That's actually the latest one I brought out. And then there's a few other little quirky courses that you can take. But there's also, I've got my own podcast if you want me to talk about it.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Sure. So if you don't want to spend any money, right, and you want to learn kind of over time, then the Cryptoverse, which is like the universe of crypto, that's a podcast that I do every day of the week. If every episode is about 12 to 15 minutes, and I do a bit of looking at the Bitcoin price, look at how the prices of different cryptocurrencies have changed, and then I do a bit of news and commentary on what's going on in the Bitcoin world. So if you listen to the Cryptoverse long enough, I'll drop enough pearls of wisdom where you'll learn a lot from that without actually having to take a course.
Very cool. Very cool. And again, the website is Cryptoversity.com. I will have a link in today's show notes for people. So if you come by the site and look at episode 1953, which is our episode today, and trying to get on that site and having any trouble spelling it, you just click the link and get on over there. And dude, I really enjoyed talking to you today. This was a great interview. I'm sure the audience has taken a lot away from it. Final question for you. Favorite wallet?
Favorite wallet? Nice and easy question. It's not. It's a complicated question. In that new course I just created, which is literally for people who are starting from scratch, I start people off with the blockchain.info wallet.
Okay.
Right? It's a web wallet. A lot of more advanced crypto people will kick my ass for that. But because they're like, oh no, it's a web wallet. It's blah, blah. Yeah, fine. It's the simplest one, right? It's the simplest one. It's secure, and ultimately, it's the simplest one to start with. Okay. The actual best wallet to use is a hardware wallet, right? Which is a little thing you put on your keyring, which is something you have to have plugged into your physical computer every time you want to authorize a transaction. So your wallet key is inside a little physical device. It kind of looks like a USB memory stick, but it has the private key inside the hardware device. So that key was never ever touched the internet. And that means it's the safest way to store any kind of cryptocurrency, because unless you've got the physical hardware key, every time you try and send money out of your Bitcoin wallet, you have to have that physical device plugged into the computer, and then you have to enter your PIN number.
Is there any way to create redundancy with that? Because it would seem like electronics fail sometimes.
Sure. I mean, they're like, technologically, they're pretty robust, right?
Okay.
However, yeah, I see what you mean. When you first initialize a Bitcoin hardware wallet, you write down what's called a recovery seed, right? Which is basically a way of rebuilding your key. If the hardware wallet were ever to die, you can just take that recovery phrase and then rebuild your private key and put it into a brand new wallet if you ever want to do that. And that means, writing out on a physical piece of paper, putting it in a safe, so that if your hardware wallet did ever die, you can still recover your money.
Gotcha. Very cool. Very cool, man. Well, hey, I've appreciated it again. Website is cryptoversity.com. Link in the show notes. And Chris, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, mate. Enjoyed it.
So thanks for joining me today, guys. If you liked this episode, hit the like button. If you disliked it, hit the dislike button. Please leave me a comment below with some feedback and get subscribed. And please support the Cryptoverse and boost cryptocurrency adoption by going to cryptoversity.com/podcast and becoming a patron. From just a few dollars a month, you can secure Cryptoversity's future, get unlimited access to all Cryptoversity courses, and access a private patrons-only chat group where you get direct access to me. That is all for today, guys. I will be back on Monday with another episode of the Cryptoverse. So until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.